Welcome to The Father's Heart with Tom Clark, better known as Papa Tom.
We were talking in the last segment with Donné Clement Petruska about the January 6th situation. I'll call it a situation, event. Maybe it's an event because I don't want to, it's not an insurrection. They portrayed it as an insurrection. But the scripture tells us to not be unaware of the wiles of the enemy. And the wiles of the enemy was to take that situation, and they already intentionally paid people to be agitators. They looked for photo ops. They took out 10,000 National Guard was supposed to show up. They wouldn't let them be there. That was totally orchestrated to create a situation where they could accuse people of being terrorists who they weren't, to take away their constitutional rights. But the whole purpose of the whole thing and what developed afterwards was the purpose of creating fear in the American public. That was the intention. And so if you listen to anything about January 6th, whatever that is, just bear in mind that the enemy's intention was to cause you to be afraid. Do you agree with that, Donné?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Because now, if you question them, you could be called a terrorist. Anybody who questions anybody in leadership right now, oh, you're a MAGA extremist. Mm-hmm. You're a Christian,
a white nationalist.
The white supremacist.
Supremacist. There's all these different labels they put on people.
But most of us don't even know what the heck they're talking about, what that even means. Mm-hmm. But if they make those labels, and then they can justify whatever they want to do. So then people now have it in the back of their minds that if we try to go to our capital, because that capital belongs to the American people, they had every right to be there. If we go to our own capital and ask for accountability, if we try to protest or stand up for ourselves, we're called terrorists, and we're going to be treated the way they treated the Islamic extremist terrorists, the jihadis. They're making it look like it's no different.
That's right.
And if you look at them, the pro-Palestinian fools out there shouting from the river to the sea, and they have no idea what they're talking about. You can see the outrageous hypocrisy of it, mm-hmm. because we saw in 2020 what they did across this country, burning it to the ground. Mm-hmm. And then you had the people on CNN saying, "Oh no, it's mostly peaceful." You remember all this?
Yes.
And so, in contrast, if you look at those two, you look at the summer of 2020, and then you look at January 6th. It's so outrageous. You can see that the goal and intent is, you be quiet and do what you're told. Mm-hmm. And if you speak up in America, I can't believe I'm saying this about America. It's so shocking. If you speak up, you're going to be afraid that you're going to be called a terrorist. And you know, your average person that has a regular job, that just has their little family in America and are trying to, that's the majority of Americans. Don't, number one, we weren't paying attention to the politics at all. And so I think it's been a big wake-up call to everybody that we need to be not only paying attention, but we need Christians and people who are filled with the Spirit to be a voice in there as well. And that's so crucial and this is what General Flynn talks about and has taught us about from the very bottom up, that we start putting ourselves in there and being more active. And that is what the other side doesn't want.
They don't want us to be active.
And so they're trying
They don't want us to know what's going on. They want us to be afraid. And we need to just stand up. We need to stand up and take simple tasks. We're going to go through this in a moment. I'm bringing to the simple tasks that we could do in America in 2024 to overcome the fear. Every time you see things, the term fake news media has been used. It's worse than fake news media. It would be maybe not so bad if it was just fake news media, but the news has been used as an instrument of the state to cause fear. It's not just fake. It's
state media.
State media. It's a propaganda tool to create fear. One of the people we're going to be talking about a little bit later, Roger Stone, the whole incident where he was arrested at like 2:00 in the morning with like 20 SWAT team members, and they notified the media ahead of time that they were going. This is they could take pictures, right? And they arrest him, handcuff him, and then the charges against him were outrageous charges, which is totally untrue, but it was all for a photo op. All these indictments against Trump, right? Like 100. Yeah,
That
allegations, 100 different, indictments or whatever it is, and the Goebbels effect, which is the German Nazi guy, who would say, well, maybe he didn't do all 100, but maybe he was responsible for 10 of them. It's like a watering down effect, and he must have done something wrong, or the government wouldn't be doing this, because the natural instinct of Americans is to trust the government,
right.
and they want to trust the government. They've been taught to trust the government, but our government has been captured.
Yeah.
And it's been captured. The deep state is real. Evil
Yeah.
is really operating through the government right now, and its purpose is to take away our freedom.
Yes.
Tyranny exists in our country right now because there are people pushing the levers of power to create tyranny,
Yes.
and they've flipped around our founding fathers, where government was supposed to be the United States for America, right? United States for America, small u, small s, for America. In 1871, they switched that around, became a corporation, United States of America, a corporate entity. And instead of the government being for the people, we now have the people for the government.
Hmm. That's
And
exactly
that's
right.
completely
Oh,
the opposite of what it was. It's ungodly. It's against the heart of God for America. It's against the covenant that we have from the Mayflower Compact
yes.
from 1620. It's against everything that is part of the fabric of being an American.
Yes.
And I know you're from South Africa, right?
South Africa. So it was my whole family. My dad was South African, my mom, and we immigrated legally
Hmm.
in the early 90s.
But you can appreciate what it is to be an American and understand the Constitution
Let me
and what
tell
it
you,
was designed to do,
my
protect
mom,
the rights of the individual.
my mom and dad made sure that we understood that, what it
Yes.
meant to be an American, and how lucky. No, I don't want to say lucky, because God sent my dad to America. South Africa was our home, and we did love South Africa.
Hmm.
But my dad's heart was for America. He used to travel here first and then move. We moved.
Hmm.
And becoming a citizen was the proudest day of his life. He wore a three-piece suit. My mother, I mean, they were dressed like they were going to the Oscars, and they went in for the swearing in ceremony, and everybody else was dressed normally. But they were so proud
Sure.
to do it, and understanding the freedoms that are here. That as an American, you can wear a hijab,
Yeah.
and you can go out and shout from the river to the sea, and you can criticize the government all that you want, and you have the freedom to do that in America.
I have
Because
a good
where else in
friend.
the world do you go and try and do that? What a lot of these people are out there protesting
Hmm.
and shouting and screaming in the streets about. I'm very angry about the pro-Palestinian thing. Um, but a lot of the people that are out there doing that, I was saying to my husband last night, why don't they go to Gaza then and do something?
Yeah. I
Why
know.
they
I get it.
to New York? And
Uh,
so you can see that even in their protests, and as they shout and scream about how terrible America is, they could not do what they were doing anywhere but here.
that's right. That's another irony, right?
Yes.
I have a good friend from South Africa. His name is John Watson. He's the head of Vine Song, and that's one of my good friends from
Oh, that's
South Africa.
South
I,
Africans pop up everywhere. Even Elon Musk is a South African.
yeah, and Rodney Howard Brown, I believe, is
Rodney Howard Brown was my dad's very good friend.
really.
Oh, my dad helped him when he started his very first church. They were around the same age, and my dad led worship, the very first service at his very first opening of the very first church
Hmm.
for Rodney Howard Brown. And he was a dear friend of my dad's. Loved him. They knew each other um, all through life. They knew each other. And Rodney Howard Brown was arrested for keeping his church open.
Yes, during COVID, I get that.
But that's because he and my dad were there in South Africa fighting apartheid,
Mhm.
where they were part of the first multiracial church under apartheid in South Africa, where they defied the law and they said anybody of any race can come to church and we're not stopping them. And so the
Mhm.
government would come in and spy on them. They
Mhm.
were arrested, they were beaten. Some terrible things happened to our family for
Mhm.
simply defying those laws, trying to stretch what was allowed there as far as freedom.
The other
And
person I know
very significant that
much
Rodney
better.
Howard Brown was the one arrested because he was there getting arrested in South Africa under apartheid with my dad.
Yeah. The other person I know from South Africa who also is in the office of prophet is Vaughn Hutchinson. And do you know who he is?
No, I don't. I don't know.
Well, Vaughn Hutchinson's good friends with Rodney Howard Brown.
Well, my mother might know some of these people because I'm a generation behind. So there's some of the people mom would know, and then maybe I wouldn't.
Yeah, he is older, and he's got a church in Moravian Falls, North Carolina.
Cool.
But that's a whole nother story. Let's go back to the story about the two prophecies that you showed in the Tulare, California meeting with Reawaken America. The first one was with Clay Clark, or Mr. Clark, actually. Tell our audience about that and how the Lord showed you what that prophecy related to.
Yes. So when the 2016 election happened, I had a number of things my dad had prophesied starting in 2007 about Donald Trump.
Mm-hmm.
How Trump would be a trumpet,
Mm-hmm.
which he was. As soon as he got into office, it was like a loud noise and everybody's attention was drawn over where it needed to be, which is what was going on in our government. So he was a trumpet. But he prophesied a number of other things. He prophesied about the wall. He would build the wall of protection around this country. So there's your border. How the economy of this country would change drastically. He prophesied 20,000 on Wall Street and many other things. But I think we have to take a break. So maybe we come back and I'll finish.
Yes, we need to take a break here in a moment, but I want to clearly focus on two of them. One having to do with a Mr. Clark, who for years I was thinking in my mind, was I the Mr. Clark? Because my last name is Clark. And you clearly showed how it wasn't that. It was Clay Clark. And then the second one's with the stone. And that's the most important thing, which the most important segment is going to be the one we come back. Because we're going to deal with the stone, how God's going to use the stone. Just like David used the stone to take down Goliath, God's going to use the stone to take down Baal and the evil powers and principalities of evil. We'll be back in a moment with Donné. We're back with Donné Clement Petruska, and she's sharing with us the two prophecies that really struck me from that Reawaken American tour, the one with a Mr. Clark and the other one with the little stone, and how God's going to use these, particularly the latter one, for 2024, both of them actually for 2024. Then they share the story about Mr. Clark. I think it was in 2014. Was it 2014 or 2013?
2013, actually.
2013.
So we have this accumulation of prophecies about Trump, and amongst them was one where he prophesied, and it was strange because he wasn't actually prophesying, he was speaking, and out of nowhere he just got this. Mm-hmm. And he said, there's a man named Donald and a man named Clark. Mm-hmm. You're both watching me, and you're asking, is God speaking to me? Yes, he is. And then he went on to prophesy about the American flag and how you're proud of your nation. Mm-hmm. You're a very influential person. You're both watching me, but there's an influential person who ended up being Clay Clark. And then he said, at the end of that prophecy, which was a very short prophecy, he said, and when it comes time for the election, you will be elected. Mm-hmm. Now, during 2016 time, we all thought he was talking about, my dad was prophesying about that. And by then, my dad was very, very sick. He passed away 2 weeks after Donald Trump was elected. Mm-hmm. And so we could not get insight from him because he could not speak anymore at that stage. And so we assumed, who is this Clark? And I remember Sheriff Clark was that around.
Yes.
I thought, well, but it doesn't make sense. Why would God say that? And when were they watching my dad? It didn't make sense. And so I just thought, well, this is something I don't understand. I'll figure it out later. Well, last year, Clay Clark, who didn't meet Donald Trump until last year, I believe, they didn't actually meet each other until then, went and sat down with him, with Donald Trump in his office. They were both sitting next to each other on a couch with a laptop in front of them watching that prophecy. Mm-hmm. And there my dad prophesies, there's a man named Donald and a man named Clark. You're both watching me, asking, is God speaking to me?
This is amazing.
And Donald Trump at that moment looked at Clay Clark and said, is he talking about us right now? And Clay Clark and his wife, Vanessa, said, yes, he is. And so at the end of that prophecy, Dad said, and when it comes time for the election, you will be elected. And he said it that firmly. But what we need to realize is that Clay Clark and Donald Trump had not met each other, and nor were they sitting watching him together until about 9 months ago when they sat in
In
Donald Trump's
2023, which is 10 years after your father saw the vision.
not have been prophesying 2016 because none of those events had happened, which helps you understand how intricately God works with prophecy. Because my dad didn't just prophesy vaguely, he actually saw a moment in time.
Very
He, in,
specific. Very
he
specific.
looked and he saw like a tunnel through time. There's a man named Donald and a man named Clark. You're both watching me. You're asking, is God speaking to me? Yes, he is. When it comes time for that election, you will be elected.
Yeah,
2024.
that's shockingly amazing and shockingly
Confirmation
specific.
to me because Dad actually prophesied from Maricopa County that he would have 2 terms.
Yeah, the worst county in the country.
Right. Of all the counties he could have been into, so where he would prophesy from was just as important sometimes as what he was saying.
Let's move on to the second one, because the second one I think is really, really key to helping overcome fear in America. Tell us about the stone.
Okay, so on February 22nd of 2014, Dad prophesied a lot. And if anybody has not seen that prophecy, you can go to the Kim Clement YouTube channel and you can find it. Look for February 22nd, 2014, watch all of it. But in that prophecy, he was talking about, he was prophesying about Donald Trump, and he said that he would hold up a simple stone, and that I think he said people would laugh at him or mock him.
Yes.
But and then he was very particular about saying, remember the name.
Stone was the name.
Stone. Now, if you look at Roger Stone, if it had not been for Roger Stone, Donald Trump would not have run for president.
Mm-hmm.
So this is going far back now into, mid to early 2000s. Roger was trying to convince Trump, we didn't find this out till later, to become president. Mm-hmm. And so that part has been played, but it's not all done, because it all has to do with a plan that we're in the middle of. That prophecy. God said the plan is so brilliant, it could only have come from me. Yes. So we hear about the plan. We've heard the plan through all of this experience.
We don't know what the plan is.
And you've got the Q and the plan, and trust the plan. Isn't it interesting that would be? Yeah. But God said his plan would be so brilliant that it could only come from him.
And I think the Lord is going to give us a piece, not the whole plan, but a small piece of the plan. And because when I watched you present that, God began to speak to me. And he said, you got to get to Donné, and she will get you to Roger Stone, because what the founding fathers had for us to overcome tyranny, there was a key to it in the election process. And that's the secret ballot. And the simplicity of it is so simple, because many parts of the country, the world, like in South Africa or other places, when you vote, people know who you vote for.
Yep.
Evil has deceived us. Subliminally, subconsciously, they make us afraid to vote. They make us afraid to vote because people are afraid if they find out who they vote for, that information will be used to harm them. It'll be used against them. That's what the whole January 6th thing was about, right? It's portrayed subliminally and so forth. However, in our system, when an American citizen puts in their ballot, their name is not on the ballot. That's why nobody knows who you vote for. Now, when you register, you could register as Republican or Democrat or independent or unaffiliated. And I personally am going to go unaffiliated because I don't want them to know anything about me.
That's what my mom did.
Yeah. And that's personal, but my point is the registration has your name and it has your address, but the actual ballot itself does not attach to your name. That's why audits really don't help you, because they don't know who you voted for, which is actually a good thing, because our founding fathers knew if the ballot was secret, people would not be afraid to vote.
Yes.
The ballot is secret. That's the truth. Yet the people are being made to believe a lie. And the lie that comes from evil is that people find out who you vote for, and therefore they're afraid to vote. That's why you have statistics that says there's 20 to 30 million Christians that don't vote. There's 65% of eligible voters don't even register. That's all because of fear. So if you want to do your thing, or your action step, there's one takeaway of an action step that any American can do in 2024 to stand up against tyranny, to exercise God given freedom, which comes out of the heart of God the Father. Freedom comes out of the heart of God the Father. He wants us to be free, just as your dad taught you as a little girl when you were 4 years old, right? He
Yes.
describes that God did not give you a spirit of fear, but of power,
Yes.
love, and a sound mind. That, that communication between the heart of your father and you as a 4-year-old girl is the same heart that comes from God the Father to each one of us. I did not give you a spirit of fear or timidity, but of power, love, and a sound mind.
Right.
I've given you the gift of America. I've given you a gift of the Constitution. I've given you the gift of the founding fathers who did what they did, not just against England, they did what they did against tyranny.
Yes.
They want you to be free. That's why everybody in the world wants to come to America, because they know in their heart they can be free. And yet the Americans in here are being bombarded by all these sources from the media that are painting pictures of fear.
Mm-hmm.
Stop them from voting.
Yes.
Stop them from being the people that God wanted them to be. So we need to start. Actually, God initiated this already in the state of North Carolina. I have one potential candidate actually understanding this, but the Lord spoke to me to get the message to Roger Stone, because he would understand how to use the power of the secret ballot to speak the truth so people would register. The purpose of that is to get 10 to 20 million more people registered to vote in 2024, to overcome the fear that people are going to find out who you vote for. Register to vote, and then vote your conscience. Vote your conscience. Go unaffiliated, vote your conscience, or what you believe is right, so that we, the people, can take back America, like
Yes.
God designed us to do. So that was what God was speaking to me, and that was what takes that prophecy away. Not takes the prophecy away, but takes the prophecy God gave your dad in 2014 and catapults it 10 years into the future in 2024, the year of the door, where we are right now. So, what are your
Exactly.
thoughts about that, Donné?
Well, the thing is that, if you think about what he, the whole purpose of it, of the prophecy and why, and all of that, you can understand now why God would need to use that gift, so that we could see clearly and move in a direction that is united. Because the thing that they've used against us is division. Other nations cannot defeat America militarily. And one thing my dad prophesied was that there was a nation itching for a new kind of war with America. And that's what we're witnessing. It's not like the wars before. This is a war on our minds.
Yes. Psyops war.
Of confusion and psyops and things like that, where it's a war on all of the American people in a new way. And so God is taking us through a process of how to deal with this new warfare, and he's actually having to guide us. God's having to guide us through. There's no other way.
What's
Not
the
even
last word you can share? What's the last word you can share with our audience about
do
going
not
to the
be
house of
afraid.
the Do not be
Do
afraid.
not be afraid. If I could share anything, do not allow fear to overcome you, because your enemy will know it. Don't be afraid. You follow your heart. You do what God tells you to do, and become active. Don't sit back. Faith is action. And so whatever it is that you can do, and you go to God yourself and you ask him yourself, and he will show it and reveal to you. You simply ask. And that is the one thing that if I could tell anybody,
Take action.
let God guide you.